If you thought Jack the Ripper was bad, today's madman makes Jack's reign of terror seem like a wholesome walk to Sunday church. Let's get into it.
Morbid History.
So, the man of the hour, or at least this episode, was a man named Joseph Vacher, and he was dubbed the French Ripper. But while Jack may have stalked the fog-drenched alleys of London, Vacher took his horrors on the road, into the countryside, rural France. He was a drifter with a thirst for carnage and left an extremely horrifying bloody trail across the entire French countryside during the 1890s. There he attacked shepherds, farmhands, and unsuspecting wanderers with a frenzy that would make even the most hardened true crime connoisseur shudder. His victims, mutilated beyond recognition, their bodies desecrated in ways that defied human understanding. So, how did this once unassuming French man transform into the most notorious serial slayer of all of France? Well, dear morbid pals, settle in, because this is a tale of madness, mayhem, and life cancellations most foul. The making of a monster. Joseph's story begins in 1869 in a very large and deeply dysfunctional farming family. His childhood was rooted in tragedy from the very start. His own twin brother was snuffed out in their cradle, demised by an older sibling who had placed a loaf of bread over his twin's tiny face and thus denying him air supply. Seems like no one in this family was doing very good. Not a very nice start to life. Yes. Joseph himself then, well, he was very early on showing some very firm signs of a person with violence at his very core. This earned him a reputation as someone to be feared even at a young age. Unable to control him, his parents eventually sent him to live with his sister, who just happened to run a brothel. There, in the middle of the debauchery of the establishment, young Vacher contracted syphilis at just 18 years old. And that disease ravaged his body so quickly that he actually needed to have his left testicle removed, and this procedure left him feeling emasculated. This indignity, as he saw put upon him, he would later take out on his unfortunate victims. We will come to that later. As the years passed, his mental state deteriorated further. He was institutionalized multiple times, but each of those times he was deemed cured and set loose upon the world. And this is when he started his little military stint, becoming a soldier. There, in the military in 1893, he became fixated on a young woman called Louise Barrand, obsessing over her to the point of madness. And when she rejected his advances over and over again, because she was already in love with a different soldier, he snapped. And in classic brooding villain style, he decided to do the only rational thing, and he shot her, his love interest, 3 times, and then tried to self-cancel by shooting himself in the upper part of his body in a dramatic act of self-destruction. Thankfully, the lady survived, but fate, cruel as ever, lended him the same mercy. But life just became even harder after all that. The bullet disfigured him, twisting his face into a permanent sneer, and one of his eyes drooping lifelessly as one part of his face became paralyzed. Whether the trauma to his brain amplified his insanity or simply stripped away the last vestiges of humanity, what emerged was something far worse than before. And thus, as someone who would be doing these things among people, he was promptly sent to an asylum. And then he was promptly released again, because he was deemed harmless. Spoiler alert! He was most definitely not. Not even a little. A trail of terror. Now freed from whatever feeble restraints those local asylums had on him for a while, and held him back from his darkest desires, I guess, in 1984, Joseph embarked out into the world, into the French countryside, and into a 3-year-long cancellation spree.
Shit's all fucked up! Don't forget to like and subscribe!
Just crisscrossing the French countryside as a vagabond, preying on those who were vulnerable and alone, he was a predator in the truest sense of the word, striking with swift and brutal efficiency. And his weapon of choice? A knife. And he wielded that knife with nightmarish enthusiasm. His poor victims were often very, very young men and women, teenagers, working in isolated rural areas, their bodies discovered in grotesque states, mutilated with an almost inhuman ferocity, throats just slashed so deeply they nearly took the upper part away from the lower part, if you know what I mean. Stab wounds always numbering in the dozens, as though he relished every single plunge of that blade. And, as said, in some cases, even genital mutilation. Perhaps like a twisted revenge onto his own perceived emasculation. Authorities, though, were baffled because the randomness of these attacks. They were like here, there, and everywhere, and it was nearly impossible to track this person, this unknown assailant, down. He dressed as a vagrant, blending into the wandering laborers and beggars of the time, a wolf draped in the rags of the downtrodden, and he struck without warning, without pattern, and without mercy. A lone shepherd or shepherdess just tending to their flock, or a farmhand taking a moment's respite. They all fell victim to Joseph's blade. And after each of these horrifying slaughters, he simply moved on. And he moved on as just another nameless drifter, lost in the sea of all these vagabonds and poor homeless vagrants in the sea of the rural poor. The known victims. Though Joseph himself confessed to over a dozen dearly departures. It is believed he may have taken even more life subscriptions. So now I'm going to give space to the poor souls who are confirmed to have fallen to his blade. And for my own and your sanity, I'm just going to say this piece of information. The victims were either during afterlife cancellation or before taken forcefully and usually mutilated in their nether area. Now let's get into the victims. Eugene Delhomme, 19th of May 1894, 21 years old. Strangled, throat cut, a piece of her right breast torn off and kicked in abdomen. Louise Marcel, 20th of November 1894, 13 years old. Strangled, throat cut, disemboweled, breasts cut off and sodomized. Adele Morteau, 12th of May 1895, 17 years old. Strangled, throat cut, right breast mutilated and robbed. Widow Morand, 24th of August 1895, 68 years old. Strangled, throat cut, disemboweled, breasts ripped off and sodomized. Victor Portalier, September 1895, 16 years old. Strangled, throat cut, disemboweled, neither parts removed and sodomized. Aline Allais, 23rd of September 1895, 16 years old. Throat cut, left thigh and abdomen cut, possibly sodomized. Pierre Massot-Pellet, 29th of September 1895, 14 years old. Strangled, throat cut, disemboweled, possibly mutilated down there, and sodomized. Marie Mosier, 19, strangled, throat cut, nose bitten off, possibly sodomized. Rosine Rodier, 1st of October 1896, 14 years old. Strangled, throat cut, disemboweled, and downstairs removed. Claudius Bupid, May 1897, 12 years old. Strangled, throat cut, downstairs mutilated and sodomized. The capture and his end. By 1897, Joseph's reign of terror got an abrupt end when he attempted to assault a woman who was strong enough to fight back and alerted authorities. Thankfully. Upon his arrest, he exhibited erratic behavior, professing divine justification for his action, claiming he was guided by celestial voices on a holy mission, and really embraced his insanity. In another desperate bid to evade responsibility, he also claimed that his violent impulses derived from some lingering effects because of a rabies treatment he had undergone as a child after being bit by a dog. And as thus he tried to assert that his crude inclinations and his altered mind and temperament was caused by that rabies dog. Okay. However, the court was not swayed by his theatrics. Forensic psychiatrists examined him and concluded that he was fully aware of his crimes and their consequences. His trial was swift and justice uncompromising. For his crimes, he was sentenced to the guillotine, and on December 31, 1898, the executioner's blade, or well, the guillotine, the blade dropped, bringing his deprived, grotesque legacy to an end. Finally. Stubborn to the end though, it said that his last words as he stood there before the guillotine was, "I am a martyr." But yeah, of course, history does not remember Joseph as any kind of martyr. Instead, he is the French Ripper, or plain and simply a monster. Let me know down below what you think. And please remember to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel and the algo boosting. And yeah, stay hydrated, stay amazing, and most of all, stay morbid. Mwah! And a giant thanks to all my channel members and my Patreon members. You mean the absolute world to me. Thanks for supporting the channel. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.